The San Francisco fog clung to the evening like a jealous lover, wrapping the streets in a damp, gray shroud as I pulled into the driveway of my family's Victorian home in Pacific Heights. The engine of my beat-up Honda Civic coughed before it died, a fitting echo of the exhaustion sinking into my bones. I'd just clocked out of a 10-hour shift at the bookstore, my fingers still smelling of ink and old paper, my back aching from hauling crates of hardcover. But here I was, as always, at the house that wasn't mine anymore, ready to play the role I'd been cast in since I was old enough to balance a checkbook. Olivia Grant. The family's invisible ATM. I grabbed the sapphire locket from the passenger seat, its cool weight grounding me. It was my grandmother's, the only thing in this house that ever felt like it belonged to me. The locket's intricate filigree caught the faint glow of the porch light, and for a moment I could almost hear her voice, soft, steady, warning me to hold on to myself. I slipped it into my pocket and stepped out into the mist, the air sharp with salt from the nearby bay. The front door loomed ahead, its chipped paint a reminder of the mortgage I'd been paying for 3 years to keep this place from foreclosure. 3 years of my savings, my overtime, my dreams of a graduate degree in literature, all funneled into a family that never once said thank you. Inside, the house smelled of roasted garlic and overcooked dreams. The dining room was a tableau of suburban normalcy. Mom, Susan, fussing over a table set with her best china. Dad, Robert, scrolling through his iPad with the same disinterest he'd shown me since I was a kid. And my sister, Natalie, lounging like a queen in her overpriced athleisure, her highlighted hair catching the chandelier's glow. Her son, Liam, darted through the room, a 7-year-old tornado clutching a juice box that was a disaster waiting to happen. I braced myself, knowing what was coming. It always did. "Olivia, watch him, will you?" Natalie's voice sliced through the chatter, sharp and entitled, as if I were her personal nanny. I opened my mouth to warn Liam about the juice, but he tripped, and the sticky red liquid exploded across my work boots and the hem of my slacks. The room froze, and before I could even sigh, Natalie was on her feet, arms crossed, her manicured nails gleaming like tiny daggers. "God, Olivia, can you not handle him for 5 minutes without screwing it up?" she snapped, her tone dripping with the kind of disdain that made my stomach twist. She wasn't even watching him. I was. Like always. I knelt, grabbing a paper towel from the counter and dabbed at my boots, the damp fabric clinging to my skin. My cheeks burned, not from the juice, but from the weight of her words, the way they landed like a practiced blow. Mom set a platter of roast chicken on the table, her face serene, as if her eldest daughter hadn't just humiliated me. "Dinner in 5, she said, her voice light, like we were a Hallmark card family. Dad didn't look up from his screen. Natalie's husband, Tom, strolled in, chuckling at something on his phone, oblivious to the tension. "Babe, did you remind Olivia about Friday?" Tom asked, not even glancing my way. I froze, the paper towel crumpled in my hand. "What's Friday?" Natalie plopped into a chair, popping a baby carrot into her mouth with a casualness that made my blood simmer. "We leave for the Bahamas. You'll watch Liam, right?" The room tilted. Everyone nodded, like it was a done deal, like I was their live-in servant. "What trip?" I asked, my voice tighter than I meant it to be. Mom laughed, a soft, dismissive sound, like I'd missed a memo posted on the fridge. "The Bahamas, honey. We all need a break." "All." The word hit like a punch. "You mean you're all going?" Natalie rolled her eyes, chewing loudly. "Well, yeah. It's been a brutal year." Brutal. I swallowed the word, tasting its bitterness. A brutal year for them, maybe, sipping lattes and planning tropical getaways while I worked double shifts to keep their lights on. My hands shook as I set the paper towel down. I can't that weekend. I booked a solo retreat in Mendocino for my birthday. The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Natalie tilted her head, her eyes narrowing like I'd just spoken in tongues. Are you serious? Yes, I said, my voice steady despite the pulse hammering in my throat. I've had it planned for months. Natalie's chair scraped against the hardwood as she stood, her face twisting into something ugly. You selfish little brat. After everything we've done for you? I met her gaze, my spine straightening. I've paid the mortgage on this house for 3 years, out of my own pocket. Dad's head snapped up, his iPad forgotten, but he said nothing. Natalie stormed around the table, her eyes blazing. Don't you dare throw that in our faces. We give you family, and this is how you repay us? Before I could react, her hand flew, connecting with my cheek in a stinging slap. The room spun, the sharp pain blooming across my face like a wildfire. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my cheek, the heat of it searing under my fingers. Mom didn't gasp. She didn't move. She just sighed, reaching for the mashed potatoes. Someone has to stay behind, Olivia, she muttered, like I was being dramatic for having a pulse. Dad's eyes flicked back to his iPad. Liam stared at the table, his juice box forgotten. The silence was deafening, broken only by the clink of Mom's fork against her plate. I stood there, my cheek throbbing, my heart pounding like a trapped animal. I looked at the sapphire locket, now clutched in my hand, its edges biting into my palm. It was the only thing tethering me to the ground. I set it down carefully on the table, next to the blue porcelain teacup I always used here, the one they never let me touch as a kid, reserved for Natalie or guests. I walked to the sink, my movements slow, deliberate, like I was afraid to shatter the air. Behind me, the family resumed their chatter, forks scraping, Natalie laughing at something Tom said. The world just moved on, like my pain was a minor inconvenience. Outside, the fog had thickened, the streetlights buzzing with a low, electric hum. I got into my car, the cold leather seat grounding me as I gripped the wheel. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. I just drove, the city's lights blurring into streaks of gold and white. Back in my Oakland loft, I didn't take off my coat. I sat at my kitchen table, the locket heavy in my pocket, and opened my banking app. My thumb hovered over the screen, then moved with a precision I didn't know I had. Mortgage payment, canceled. Grocery delivery, canceled. Streaming subscriptions, gone. Family phone plan, terminated. I typed 2 words under notes. Effective immediately. I set the phone down, the silence in the room so thick it felt like a living thing. My cheek still stung, but something else was burning inside me. Not anger, not yet. Resolve. I stared at the teacup I'd taken from their cabinet years ago, its sapphire flowers delicate against the porcelain. They'd never let me use it growing up. It was Mom's favorite, for Natalie, for guests, for anyone but me. I'd taken it one night, wrapped it in a towel and hidden it in my drawer, not out of spite, but because I needed something to remind me I was worth more than their leftovers. An hour later, my phone lit up like a slot machine. Mom, Natalie again, Dad. 19 missed calls, texts piling up like debris after a storm. Please call us, we need to talk. I didn't reply. I just sat there, staring at the teacup, its delicate flowers catching the dim light of my kitchen. It wasn't just a cup. It was a symbol of who got to be fragile in this family, who got grace and who got duty. Natalie got grace, I got bills. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my neighbor's sprinklers hissing against the sidewalk. The fog had lifted, leaving a crisp, clear day that felt like a lie. I brewed coffee in a chipped mug, avoiding the teacup. I wasn't ready to touch it yet. My phone was a minefield, 34 missed calls, 11 voicemails. I hesitated, then played the first one. Mom's voice. Soft but clipped. "Hi, honey, just wondering if you're okay. Can you call?" The second. "Natalie, how dare you cancel the mortgage? That's our family home, Olivia. You're punishing Liam to get back at me." The third. "Dad, we just want to talk. Don't make this harder than it is." I stopped there. The texts were worse. "Natalie, Mom hasn't slept. She's crying. I hope you're happy." Then, "You couldn't even wait until after the trip. Selfish doesn't cover it." I locked the phone, set it face down. I'd spent years believing silence made me the bigger person, but silence in this family didn't buy peace. It invited punishment. Then my phone pinged, a Facebook notification. A family friend, someone I hadn't seen since high school, tagged me in a post. A vague quote in bold. "Some people forget where they came from." Sad, really. Below it, a comment from Aunt Linda. "Unbelievable. Turning your back on your own blood?" My stomach churned. They were already rewriting the story, painting me as the villain. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a spreadsheet I hadn't touched in months. I started typing. Mortgage, 36 months, $3,200, 0 cents. X 36. Groceries, weekly, $180, 0 cents. X 52, X 3. Years, streaming accounts, utilities, Liam's preschool deposit. The total climbed past $127,000, 0 cents. I leaned back, exhaling. Not anger, clarity. A sharp knock at the door jolted me. My heart raced as I peered through the peephole. It was Mrs. Callahan, my neighbor, her gray cardigan as comforting as her warm smile. She held a foil-wrapped plate. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, her voice gentle. "Brought you some scones. Thought you might need something warm." I blinked, stepping aside to let her in. "We heard yelling last night," she added, her eyes kind but knowing. "Just checking in." "I'm learning to be okay," I said, more to myself than to her. She nodded, leaving the scones and a hug that felt like a lifeline before slipping out. I unwrapped the foil, the buttery scent filling the room. It was the first kindness I'd felt in days that didn't come with strings. That evening, my phone buzzed again. "Natalie." I opened the message. "If you're going to act like this, maybe we need to rethink whose family." My thumbs hovered, itching to fire back something sharp. I typed deleted, typed again, then settled on, "I agree." I hit send and didn't wait for a reply. The silence that followed was mine to keep, but the peace didn't last. Just after midnight, a faint hiss woke me. The air in my loft felt wrong, thick, chemical. I stumbled out of bed, my head spinning, and traced the sound to the kitchen. Gas was leaking from the stove. The knob turned just enough to be deliberate. My heart pounded as I shut it off, flung open the windows, and gulped fresh air. Someone had been here. Someone who knew where I lived. The next morning, I drove to work, my hands trembling on the wheel. The bookstore was my sanctuary, its shelves a fortress of stories where I could disappear. But as I parked, I noticed my car felt sluggish, the brakes soft. I barely stopped in time at a red light, my pulse racing as a truck barreled past. When I checked later, the brake line was frayed, tampered with. The mechanic confirmed. I sat in the shop, my hands shaking, the locket heavy in my pocket. This wasn't just anger, this was war. At work, Natalie showed up unannounced, Liam trailing behind her. She didn't knock, just strode into the bookstore like she owned it, her designer sunglasses perched on her head. "Liam wanted to see you," she said, pushing him forward. His small arms wrapped around me, his face bright with a smile that cracked my heart. "I missed you, Auntie," he whispered. "I missed you too, sweetheart," I said. but my eyes locked on Natalie's. She was already dropping a tote bag on the counter, toys spilling out, a dinosaur, a sock, another juice box. "We're heading to a spa," she said, brushing lint off her shirt. "You're good with him, right?" "A few hours." I stood, my voice firmer than I felt. "I can't today." Her eyebrows shot up, her hand on the door. "Why not?" "I have things to do," I said, kneeling to Liam's level. "But we'll hang out soon, okay? I promise." His lip trembled. "Did I do something bad?" "No, never," I said, my throat tightening. "You're perfect." Natalie scoffed. "So now you don't love him?" "Don't do that," I said, standing. "Don't twist my boundaries into betrayal." She stepped closer, her voice venomous. "This is why no one trusts you, Olivia. You're unstable." Before I could respond, she shoved me hard into a shelf. Books toppled, my shoulder slamming against the wood, pain shooting through my arm. Liam gasped, clutching his dinosaur. Natalie grabbed his hand and stormed out, leaving me on the floor, my breath ragged. Mrs. Callahan appeared at the shop's entrance, her recycling bin in hand, her eyes sharp. She didn't say a word, just nodded, a quiet acknowledgement that she'd seen it all. I pulled myself up, my shoulder throbbing, and locked the door behind them. I wasn't collapsing this time. I was done being their punching bag. That night, as I walked home, I felt eyes on me. A man in a dark jacket lingered across the street, his face shadowed. He followed me for 3 blocks, his steps matching mine, never closing the distance but never falling back. My pulse raced as I ducked into a crowded coffee shop, waiting until he passed. When I got home, I double-locked the door, my hands shaking as I clutched the locket. Someone was watching me, one who wanted me scared. The next day, I drove to a notary's office in Berkeley, my manila folder stuffed with bank statements and receipts. The notary, a man in his 60s with a kind but weathered face, listened as I laid out my plan. "I want to sever all financial ties to my family," I said. "No more mortgage, no utilities, no health insurance. I'm done." He scanned the spreadsheet, his eyes widening at the $127,000 0 cents total. "That's what you've given them," he said, not a question. "Yes," I said, "and I'm not asking for repayment. I just want it to end." He drafted the documents, his pen steady where my hands were not. I signed, my signature a declaration of freedom. Back home, I scanned the papers and emailed them to Mom, Dad, and Natalie. Subject: effective today. No pleasantries, just, "This is not a threat. This is closure." Their responses came like gunfire. "Mom, is this a joke?" "Natalie, you're treating us like garbage. You should be ashamed." "Dad, so we're just a number to you now?" I didn't reply. I changed my number, the act as final as a door slamming shut. That evening, I sat on my couch, the locket in my hand, my grandmother's diary open on my lap. Her words were a lifeline. "They only loved me when I was useful," underlined twice, the ink bold and angry. She'd seen it too, the way this family devoured its own. A sticky note on the cover read, "Break their chains." I traced the words, my fingers trembling. She'd fought in silence, I wouldn't. I opened my laptop and started typing. I used to think being a good daughter meant giving everything. My money, my time, my heart. I paid their bills, watched their kids, swallowed their blame. And when I said no, they called me selfish. I didn't name them. I didn't need to. I posted it to Facebook, LinkedIn, a small mental health forum I joined months ago. No hashtags, no drama, just truth. I closed the laptop and watched a cardinal land on my balcony, its red feathers bright against the gray. By morning, my phone was a war zone. 142 notifications. Messages from strangers. I thought I was alone. You gave me words for my pain. My post had spread, shared 20,000 times in 72 hours. Advocacy groups picked it up, then a mental health blog. I didn't breathe right for a day, but it wasn't fear. It was connection. People saw me. Natalie's voicemail came next, her voice a hiss. You think this is brave? It's pathetic, airing our laundry like a martyr. I deleted it, blocked her number. Mom texted, what you did was cruel. Think of Natalie's job. Think of Liam. I blocked her too. Then an email from a tech firm, Natalie's employer, requesting a clarification conversation about her conduct. I hadn't named her, but the internet had. A cousin, Megan, messaged. I always knew something was off. Thank you. Aunt Mary wrote, they made you carry everything. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. The family split, some silent, some siding with Natalie, but for the first time I wasn't alone. Then Liam called. His voice was small, hopeful. Auntie, will you come to my school's poetry night? You're my favorite. My heart cracked open. I'd love to, sweetheart, I said. I really would. I hung up, the locket warm in my hand. The cycle might not end with me, but it would change. I walked to my balcony, where a single daffodil had bloomed in a pot I hadn't touched. I smiled, the kind that comes from somewhere deeper than relief. They didn't own my story anymore. The Oakland morning was deceptively calm, the kind of crisp golden light that made you believe the world could be kind. I stood on my balcony, clutching a chipped mug of coffee, the daffodil's yellow petals swaying in the breeze. A quiet rebellion against the chaos of the past week. My phone, now with a new number, sat silent on the kitchen counter, but the weight of 20,000 shares of my viral post pressed against my chest like a phantom. I'd bared my soul to the world, and the world had answered. Not just with likes or retweets, but with stories, raw and jagged, from strangers who'd carried the same invisible burdens I had. Yet the silence from my family was louder, a storm brewing just beyond the horizon. I set the mug down and reached for my grandmother's sapphire locket, its cool weight a tether to the woman who'd fought in secret. Her diary, now resting in my desk drawer, had become my compass, its pages filled with truths too heavy for her to speak aloud. Break their chains, she'd written, and I was trying. But the chains were heavier than I'd expected, forged not just in money or duty, but in guilt, love, and the fear of being alone. A sharp buzz from the intercom jolted me. I hesitated, my pulse quickening. No one knew my new number, but my address wasn't a secret. I crossed the loft, the hardwood cool under my bare feet, and pressed the button. Who is it? It's Mom, Susan's voice crackled through the speaker, clipped and urgent. And Dad, we need to talk. My stomach twisted. I hadn't seen them since the dinner where Natalie slapped me, where Mom dismissed my pain with a sigh and a scoop of mashed potatoes. Now they were here, unannounced, on a Saturday morning. I buzzed them up, not because I wanted to, but because running wasn't who I was anymore. I slipped the locket into my pocket and braced myself. The knock came, 3 sharp raps that echoed like a gavel. I opened the door and there they stood. Mom, her lips tight, eyes scanning my loft like a judge. Dad, Robert, in an ironed button-down, his smile too wide, too practiced. They stepped inside without asking, their presence filling the small space like smoke. Olivia, Dad began, spreading his arms as if we were at a family barbecue. You've been hard to reach. We were worried. I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter. What are you doing here? Mom's gaze flicked to the daffodil on the balcony, then back to me, her expression unreadable. "You humiliated us," she said, her voice low and sharp, skipping pleasantries. "That email, legal documents, you think you're above us now?" Dad nodded, his smile fading. "You don't scare us with your little notary stunt. You're proving how selfish you are." I let them talk, their words piling up like debris. I'd expected anger, but this was something else. Calculated, performative, like they'd rehearsed it. Dad gestured toward the window, the city skyline faint through the morning haze. "What would your boss think? All this talk about community at that bookstore, and you cut off your own parents. Real noble." "This has nothing to do with my job," I said, my voice steady despite the heat rising in my chest. "Doesn't it?" he pressed, leaning closer. "Your whole non-profit vibe, compassion, generosity, maybe start at home?" Mom's voice cut in, low and bitter like a blade slipped between ribs. "You'll regret this when we're gone, just like you regretted that miscarriage." Time stopped. My breath caught, not from shame, but from the sheer audacity. They'd used that wound before, years ago, when I was too young to fight back. A private pain they wielded like a club. But now, standing in my own home, I saw her clearly. Not as my mother, but as a woman who needed me small to feel big. Something broke free inside me, and something else solidified. "Don't ever speak to me again," I said, my voice level, final. I opened the door, my hand steady on the knob. "Get out." Dad's jaw twitched, but Mom's face crumpled, not with sorrow, but with fury. "You're making a mistake," she hissed, brushing past me. Dad followed, his silence louder than any words. I closed the door, turned the lock, and leaned against it, my heart racing but my resolve unshaken. I wasn't hiding anymore. At the bookstore that afternoon, I tried to lose myself in the rhythm of shelving new releases, the scent of paper and ink a balm. But my shoulder still ached from Natalie's shove yesterday, and the memory of the tampered gas leak and brake line gnawed at me. Someone was trying to scare me, or worse. I glanced out the window, half expecting to see that shadowed figure from last night, but the street was empty, just tourists and dog walkers under the San Francisco sun. A soft tap on my shoulder made me jump. It was Rachel, my manager, her dark eyes kind but searching. "Everything okay out there earlier?" she asked, nodding toward the street where I'd parked. I hesitated, then nodded. "My parents showed up, tried to make a scene." She raised an eyebrow, pulling up a stool beside me. "You don't owe me details, but if it happens again, say the word. Security's on speed dial." "They're mad I set boundaries," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. "They're trying to make me the bad guy." Rachel nodded, her expression unwavering. "We've got your back here. This is your space. You're safe." Her words landed like a lifeline, the first time someone had said that without expecting something in return. I smiled, small but real, and went back to shelving. Later, as I tidied up after a community book club, an older customer, Ms. Rivera, approached my desk with a small paper bag. Her warm brown eyes crinkled as she handed it to me. "Thought you might like these," she said. Inside were lavender shortbread cookies, a sticky note taped to the top. "You help people. Don't forget who you are." I blinked back tears, the kind that come from being seen, truly seen without strings attached. "Thank you," I whispered, and she squeezed my hand before leaving. These were my people now, the ones who didn't demand my soul in exchange for kindness. That evening, I returned to my loft, the city's lights twinkling through the fog. I changed into sweats, brewed chamomile tea, and opened the box I'd kept under my bed for years. Inside, wrapped in soft linen, was my grandmother's diary, its leather cover cracked but warm. A yellow sticky note clung to the front, her handwriting steady. break their chains. I traced the words, my fingers lingering on the ink. She'd been the quiet one in our family stories, the peacemaker who baked pies and sewed curtains. No one spoke of her double shifts at the factory or how my grandfather would freeze her out if she dared rest. But she'd seen it all, and she'd fought in her own way, with ink, with silence, with hope for me. I opened the diary, the pages yellowed but alive. May 12, 1967. My husband says I'm selfish for resting, but I worked 16 hours today. July 9. They say a mother gives everything, but who gives to her? Each entry was a shard of glass, sharp and glittering. They only loved me when I was useful. Underlined twice, the page slightly torn. I pressed my fingers to the words, my throat tight. She'd carried this alone, but she'd left it for me, a map to freedom. Near the back, I found her final entry, dated weeks before she passed. I leave this to the granddaughter who will break the chain. If you're reading this, you already have. A dried daffodil was taped to the margin, its petals fragile but intact. I was 9 again, kneeling in her garden, her sun hat shading us both as she handed me a tiny shovel. These come back, she'd said, even when winter tries to kill them. I hadn't understood then. Now I did. I closed the diary, my hands steady, and walked to the balcony. The daffodil swayed, defiant in its pot. I wasn't just breaking chains. I was forging something new. But the world wasn't done testing me. The next morning, I drove to Sonoma, the diary in my passenger seat, the locket around my neck. The cemetery on Maple Ridge was quiet, the air heavy with dew and memory. I knelt at my grandmother's grave, the headstone simple but worn, her name etched in elegant script. I placed the diary gently against it, my fingers lingering on the leather. "I see you," I whispered. "You weren't invisible, I promise." I kept the daffodil, tucking it into my pocket, its fragility a reminder of strength. As I stood, my phone buzzed, an email from a journalist named Laura, subject, "Your story matters." "Hi, Olivia. I found your post online. I'm working on a series about generational trauma, how cycles continue, how they break. Would you talk to me? Your voice could help so many." I stared at the words, my heart racing. I'd spent my life avoiding spotlights, disappearing to keep the peace. But maybe silence had protected them, not me. Maybe the point was light. I replied, my fingers steady. "Yes, but only if I can bring her words, too." I attached a scan of my grandmother's final entry, the daffodil's image beside it. I hit send, the act as final as signing the notary papers. 2 days later, I met Laura at a Seattle cafe, a quiet spot near the library with mismatched mugs and soft jazz. I arrived early out of habit, clutching a black coffee, no cream, just like my grandmother. Laura walked in, her leather satchel warm, her smile warm but unintrusive. She didn't reach for her recorder, just sat across from me, her eyes steady. "Thank you for coming," she said. "No pressure. I just want to listen." I exhaled, the steam from my coffee curling between us. "I wrote that post because I didn't want another girl growing up thinking her worth was what she gave up." Laura nodded, her pen idle. So I kept going, the words spilling out, not rushed, not desperate, just true. I told her about babysitting Liam while my family sipped cocktails in the Bahamas, about working 2 jobs to pay their bills while they borrowed my car and left it empty, about Mom calling my giving a gift like I had no right to stop, about Natalie's slap, the way she laughed, the way I stood there, cheek burning, realizing they didn't see me. I walked away, I said, not because I hated them, but because I loved myself enough to stop shrinking. I pulled the daffodil from my notebook, its petals pressed flat. "This is from her." She wrote in secret, resisted in silence, and gave me the strength to do what she couldn't. Laura's eyes softened, not with pity but with reverence. Can I include her words? That's why I'm here, I said, sliding the diary scan across the table. 2 weeks passed, quiet but heavy. I didn't check for updates, didn't refresh my inbox. I watered my balcony herbs, read poetry, listened to Coltrane while washing dishes. Then one morning, my coworker texted me a link. The ones who stay behind the price of family silence. My name, my face, soft lit in that cafe corner, the daffodil bright against the page. Below it, my grandmother's quote, "They only loved me when I was useful. I hope she chooses something else." The article spread. Women's forums, university seminars, mental health blogs. Strangers messaged me, their stories mirroring mine, their pain a chorus I hadn't known I was part of. My family didn't reach out. Their silence was a weapon, but I didn't feel abandoned. I felt unburdened. Then one night, my phone buzzed. Liam's number. I hesitated, my heart caught between love and fear. I answered. "Auntie," he said, his voice small but steady. "Mom's really mad." I sighed, gentle but weary. "I figured, sweetheart." Pause, then softer. "But I'm not. I read your article, all of it. I want to be like you." Tears welled up, unbidden. "Promise me something," I whispered. "Never let anyone shame you for choosing peace, not even the people who say they love you." "I won't," he said, his voice older than his years. After we hung up, I sat in the dark, the locket warm against my chest. The next day, an email arrived from the Bay Area Women's Center, inviting me to speak at a community night, stories of reclaiming roles. I almost said no, my old instinct to hide flaring up, but I looked at the diary, my grandmother's cursive bold. "If you're reading this, you already have." I typed yes, but only if I can read her words too. The night of the event, the room was warm, filled with folding chairs and women, young, old, trembling, nodding. I stood under soft lights, the diary in my hands, my voice steady. I read my story, her story, our story. There were tears, laughter, a silence that didn't suffocate but opened. I wasn't alone anymore. The next morning, I stepped onto my balcony, the city waking below. The daffodil had multiplied, 2 blooms now, bright against the gray. I hadn't planted them. They'd grown from petals I'd scattered months ago, my grandmother's last flower. I picked one, tucked it behind my ear, and walked inside, past the shelf of bills I no longer paid, past a new photo frame of me at Ocean Beach, smiling, truly smiling. Not as a caretaker, not as a fallback, just as me. But the storm wasn't over. That afternoon, as I left the bookstore, a dark SUV idled across the street. Natalie's. She stepped out, her face a mask of fury, Liam nowhere in sight. "You think you're some hero," she spat, her voice loud enough to turn heads. "You've ruined my life." I stopped, my bag heavy on my shoulder. I'd told my truth. If that ruins you, that's not on me. She stepped closer, her hands balled into fists. "My boss called me in today. They're reviewing my conduct because of your little article. You named me, didn't you?" "I didn't," I said, my voice calm. "People made their own connections." "Mother!" she screamed, lunging forward. I stepped back, but her hand grazed my arm, her nails leaving red streaks. A passerby, a man in a bike helmet, paused, his phone out, recording. Natalie noticed, her face flushing, and backed off, but not before hissing, "You'll pay for this." She sped off, her tires screeching. I stood there, my arms stinging, my heart racing, but my feet rooted. The biker approached, his voice gentle. "You okay? I got it on video if you need it." I nodded, my throat tight. "Thank you." Back home, I cleaned the scratches, my hand shaking not from fear but from the weight of it all. Natalie's job was at risk. Not because I'd named her, but because her actions, her entitlement, her cruelty were catching up. The tech firm's email had been vague, but the internet wasn't. Comments on the article linked her name, her LinkedIn, her public tantrums. She dragged herself into the light. The next day, my cousin Megan called. "Olivia," she said, her voice soft, "I always knew Natalie was off. I'm sorry I didn't say anything sooner. You didn't deserve this." I exhaled the validation like a warm blanket. "Thank you, Megan." Aunt Mary emailed later, "They made you carry everything." I should have spoken up. You deserved better. Their words weren't just apologies, they were cracks in the family's facade, proof I wasn't crazy, wasn't alone. But Natalie wasn't done. That night I woke to a crash outside. My heart pounded as I peered through the blinds. My car's windshield was shattered, a brick on the hood. A note was taped to it, scrawled in Sharpie, "Stop, or it gets worse." I called the police, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. They took a report, dusted for prints, but I knew they'd find nothing. Natalie was too smart for that. Or someone was doing her dirty work. I didn't sleep. I sat on my couch, the locket in my hand, the diary open to my grandmother's words. They only loved me when I was useful. I wasn't useful anymore, and they hated me for it, but I wasn't going back. The next week I arrived at Liam's school for poetry night, my heart a mix of hope and dread. The auditorium was warm, filled with proud parents and fidgeting kids. Liam spotted me, his face lighting up, and ran to hug me. "You came," he whispered. "Wouldn't miss it," I said, ruffling his hair. He read his poem, a simple piece about a bird learning to fly, and I clapped louder than anyone, my chest tight with pride. But as I left, Natalie was waiting in the parking lot, her arms crossed, her eyes cold. "You're not his mother," she said. "Stay away from him." "He invited me," I said, my voice firm. "I love him, Natalie, but I'm not your servant." She stepped closer, her voice a hiss. "You're tearing this family apart." "No," I said, meeting her gaze. "You did that when you decided I wasn't human." I walked to my car, my keys tight in my hand, her eyes burning into my back. I drove home, the locket warm against my chest, the daffodils image in my mind. I wasn't just surviving, I was rewriting the story, not just for me, but for Liam, for my grandmother, for every woman who'd been told her worth was in her silence. The article's reach grew, shared by advocacy groups, discussed in college classrooms, quoted in podcasts. Strangers emailed me, their stories a tapestry of pain and hope. I wasn't a hero, just a woman who'd said enough. But the threats didn't stop. A week later, I found my mailbox pried open, my bills shredded. A note inside, "You can't hide." I installed a security camera, my hands steady but my heart racing. Whoever was doing this, Natalie, a friend, a hired thug, they wouldn't break me. The Women's Center event was a turning point. I stood before those women, their faces a mirror of my own journey, and read my grandmother's words. "I hope she chooses something else." I told them about the gas leak, the brick, the stranger in the dark. "I was scared," I said, "but fear doesn't own me anymore. You don't have to stay silent to be loved." The applause was soft, not performative, but real. A woman in the back, her hands trembling, stood. "I left my family last year," she said. "Your story gave me permission to keep going." Others nodded, their eyes bright with tears or resolve. I wasn't alone, and neither were they. The next morning, I woke to 3 daffodils on my balcony, their roots tangled in soil I hadn't touched. I laughed, the sound startling in the quiet. My grandmother's legacy wasn't just words. It was life, stubborn and bright. I tucked one flower behind my ear, framed the beach photo, and let the unpaid bills sit. They weren't mine anymore, but the final test came a week later. I was leaving the bookstore when my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I answered, my heart pounding. "Olivia," a man's voice said, low and unfamiliar. "You need to stop talking, or Liam gets hurt." I froze, the world narrowing to that voice. "Who is this?" "Doesn't matter," he said. "Back off or the kid pays." The line went dead. I stood in the parking lot, my breath shallow, the locket burning against my skin. I called the police, filed another report, but fear gripped me like never before. Not for myself, but for Liam. I drove to his school, my hands shaking, and waited until I saw him, safe, laughing with friends. I exhaled, but the threat lingered. A shadow I couldn't shake. I didn't stop. I couldn't. I wrote another post, not about fear, but about courage. They want me silent, but I won't be. Not for me, not for the boy I love, not for the women who came before me. I shared it, my hands steady, the daffodil bright on my desk. The world was listening, and I was ready to speak.